The last time I heard my son's voice, he sounded normal. Not angry, not cold, just normal. If I had known that would be the last time, I would have listened more carefully. I would have remembered every word. Instead, I said goodbye like I always did. A single choice can change your life forever. Today, I'm sharing how betrayal forced me to choose myself when no one else would. Before the first chapter unfolds, please subscribe and hit like to help us reach others who might need to hear this. I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Leave your city name in the comments so I can welcome you personally. And now, the story begins. And then, he disappeared. Not from the world, not from life, only from me. People think losing someone always comes with noise, with arguments, with harsh words and broken doors. But when I lost my son, there was none of that. There was only silence. A silence so deep that it followed me from room to room. A silence that sat beside me at the dinner table. A silence that answered every question I asked in my heart. I still remember the morning I realized something was wrong. I woke up early, as I always do. The house was quiet. I made tea and picked up my phone. I had sent him a message the night before. Did you eat properly? Take care of yourself. A mother's habit. The message had been seen, but there was no reply. At first, I smiled. He must be busy, I told myself. He has his own life now. But hours passed, then the whole day, and still nothing. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. Each second felt louder than the last. I kept thinking, what did I say wrong? What did I do? I searched my memory like someone searching a dark room for a missing object, but there was nothing. No fight, no warning, no goodbye. Just silence. Weeks later, when people asked me about my son, I smiled and said, he's busy. But inside, I was breaking. Because how do you explain that your child is alive and yet no longer part of your life? This is not a story about a bad son, and it is not a story about an innocent mother. This is a story about distance, about misunderstandings, about how love can slowly fade without anyone meaning to hurt the other. This is the story of the day my son stopped talking to me, and how I lost him without a goodbye. I had only one child. From the day he was born, my world became small and full at the same time. Small because everything revolved around him, full because I never felt empty when he was near. His father passed away when my son was still young. From that day onward, we became each other's whole world. I worked hard, I worried a lot, I loved deeply. I'm not saying I was a perfect mother. I made mistakes. I spoke too much sometimes. I worried even when there was no need. But every breath of love I had, I gave to him. When he grew older, life changed quietly. School, friends, dreams. And then one day, he told me about the woman he loved. I still remember how nervous he looked when he introduced her to me. I smiled warmly. I wanted her to feel safe in my home. I welcomed her like a daughter. At least, I tried to. When they got married, I stepped back. I told myself again and again, a good mother knows when to move aside. They moved into their own home. At first, my son called often. Slowly, those calls became fewer. I didn't complain, I didn't ask questions. I believed love should be patient. I didn't know then that silence was already learning how to live between us. The distance between my son and me did not arrive suddenly. It came quietly, like dust settling in a house no one visits anymore. At first, I did not even notice it. I was too busy convincing myself that everything was normal. When he stopped calling every day, I told myself he was growing up. When his messages became shorter, I told myself life was busy. I did not want to be that mother who complains. I wanted to be understanding, modern, patient. Sometimes weeks would pass without hearing his voice. I would hold my phone in my hand and scroll through old messages. I read them slowly, like they were letters from a happier time. I never replied to those old messages. I just missed them. When I did call him, the phone rang longer than before. Sometimes he did not answer at all. Later, I would receive a short message saying, "Sorry, busy." I replied with, "It's okay, take care." I learned how to hide my disappointment behind polite words. I learned how to smile while my heart felt heavy. At night, I would sit alone and wonder when things had changed, but I could not find the moment. When I visited his home, I tried to be careful, careful with my words, careful with my advice, careful with my presence. I noticed that his wife spoke less around me. She was polite, always respectful, but there was a distance in her eyes, a distance I did not know how to cross. Once, while I was helping in the kitchen, I suggested a small thing. It was nothing important, just a habit from my own life. She smiled, nodded, and said nothing. Later that evening, my son spoke to me softly. "Ami, she likes to do things her own way." His voice was calm, but the words stayed with me. I apologized immediately. From that day on, I spoke less, I watched more. I tried to make myself smaller. I did not want to disturb the peace of their home. But peace did not return. My visits became shorter. My invitations were politely delayed. "We are busy this week," he would say. "Maybe next time." Next time slowly stopped coming. I stopped asking to visit. I waited for him to ask me instead. Days passed, weeks passed. The house felt quieter than ever. Even the walls seemed to listen to my thoughts. I would cook food and realize there was no one to share it with. I started eating less without noticing. Sometimes I blamed myself. Maybe I loved him too much. Maybe I held on for too long. Maybe I did not let go the way I should have. Other times, I blamed no one. I told myself life simply moves forward. Children grow, parents remain behind. Still, the silence hurt. Festivals came and went. I sent messages with warm wishes. Most of them were seen, few were answered. When my birthday arrived, I waited quietly. I did not expect gifts. I only hoped for a call. The phone stayed silent all day. That night, I sat alone with a small piece of cake I had bought for myself. I cut it into 2 pieces out of habit. Then I laughed softly at my own foolishness. I ate both pieces slowly. One day, I fell sick. Nothing serious, but my body felt weak. I thought of my son and called him. The phone rang, then stopped. I called again the next day. No answer. I sent a message saying, "I'm not feeling well." The message was seen. There was no reply. That night, I cried for the first time in a long while, not loudly, just quietly, into my pillow, like someone apologizing for existing. I began to feel afraid of my own phone. Each time it buzzed, my heart jumped. Each time it was not him, my heart sank again. Hope became painful. People around me noticed the change. They asked about my son. I smiled and said he was busy. I became very good at smiling. Inside, questions kept growing. Had I offended him without knowing? Had I crossed a line? Had I said something wrong years ago that finally returned? I wanted to ask him directly, but I was afraid of the answer, or worse, afraid of no answer at all. One evening, a relative mentioned casually, "He seems upset with you." Those words shook me. Upset, but about what? No one could tell me. No one seemed to know. I waited for my son to speak. I waited for him to explain. I waited for a door to open. It never did. Days turned into months. The silence grew stronger. It no longer felt temporary, it felt permanent. I stood at my front door many times thinking of going to his house. I imagined knocking gently. I imagined his face. But something always stopped me. Pride, fear, or maybe the quiet pain of a mother who doesn't want to force her way into her child's life. I told myself, if he wants me, he will come. I repeated it like a prayer. I believed it because I needed to. Deep inside, I felt something breaking. Not loudly, not suddenly, just slowly. And I did not know that the real breaking point was still waiting ahead. The turning point did not come with shouting or drama. It arrived on an ordinary afternoon when I least expected it. The sky was gray, and the house felt heavier than usual. I was folding clothes when the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I thought of ignoring it. Then something inside me said, "Answer." So I did. It was my son. For a second, I could not speak. My heart started beating too fast, like it had been waiting for this moment. I held the phone close, afraid he might disappear again. His voice sounded tired, not angry, not cold, just tired. "Ami," he said softly. That one word broke something inside me. I had waited so long to hear it. I wanted to cry, but I stayed quiet. We did not speak for a few seconds. Even the silence felt different this time. It was heavy, but not empty. He finally spoke again. "I need to tell you something." I sat down slowly. My hands were shaking. I told him I was listening. He took a deep breath, then another. He said, "I didn't know how to talk to you." Those words hurt, but I let him continue. I had waited too long to interrupt. He told me that things at home were not as peaceful as they seemed, that small misunderstandings had grown into heavy feelings, that he felt torn between his wife and me. I listened without defending myself. I listened like a mother who wanted to understand, not win. He said his wife often felt uncomfortable, not because of anything I did intentionally, but because she felt watched, compared, judged even when I said nothing. Hearing that was painful, because I never meant to make her feel that way. I only wanted to care. He said she felt like she was never enough, that every small suggestion felt like criticism to her, that my presence reminded her of expectations she was afraid of failing. I closed my eyes. I remembered every moment I had tried to help, every time I had spoken with love, not knowing how it was received. Then he said something that hurt the most. "She thinks you don't trust her." Those words sat heavy in my chest. I had trusted her with my son's happiness, but maybe trust needs to be shown, not assumed. He told me that over time the tension became too much for him. He felt like he was always choosing sides, and in trying to keep peace, he chose silence. Silence, his way of avoiding pain. Silence, his way of protecting his home. Silence, his way of losing me. I asked him one question. My voice was calm, but my heart was shaking. "Did you ever think about how I felt?" He went quiet. Then he said, "Every day." That answer surprised me, because silence had convinced me otherwise. He said he knew he was hurting me, but he did not know how to fix it, so he avoided it. He said he thought time would heal everything, that distance would soften emotions, that one day things would feel normal again. But time had only made the distance wider. I told him about my nights, the quiet dinners, the unanswered messages, the birthdays spent waiting. I did not accuse him, I only shared my truth. He began to cry. Not loudly, just softly, like someone ashamed of their own weakness. He said, "I was scared, Ami. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, and I ended up disappointing you." That was the moment I realized something important. My son was not cruel, he was not heartless, he was lost. lost between two worlds, lost between two loves, lost inside his own fear. I told him I never wanted him to choose, that I never asked him to carry my loneliness, that all I wanted was honesty. He said he thought stepping away was the respectful thing to do, that creating distance would help everyone breathe. But distance does not heal, it only hides wounds. Then he told me the truth I had feared. He said his wife had asked for space, not because she hated me, but because she felt overwhelmed. She needed time to feel secure, to feel like her home was truly hers, and he agreed. He did not tell me, he did not explain, he simply disappeared. That silence was a decision, not made to hurt me, but it hurt me anyway. I felt a strange mix of emotions: pain, relief, sadness, understanding. At least now the silence had a reason. I asked him one last thing. "Did you tell me earlier?" He said, "I was afraid you would break." I smiled sadly at that, because I had already broken, slowly, quietly, without him knowing. We talked for a long time that day, not to solve everything, just to understand. When the call ended, I sat alone in my chair. The house was still quiet, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer empty, it was full of truth. And truth, even when painful, is better than not knowing. After that phone call, I did not feel sudden happiness. Nothing magical happened. The house did not feel bright again overnight. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in many months, I understood. Understanding did not remove the pain, but it gave the pain a shape, and a shape can be held. I spent the next few days sitting quietly with my thoughts. I did not rush to call my son again. I did not demand explanations. I let the truth settle slowly. I thought about his wife. I tried to see myself through her eyes, a mother who loved deeply, a presence that never meant harm, but still felt heavy. I realized something difficult. Good intentions do not always feel good to others. Love, when unspoken or misunderstood, can become pressure, and pressure can feel like judgment. That realization hurt my pride, but it softened my heart. I asked myself honest questions. Had I truly given them space? Had I trusted them fully? Or had my worry quietly crossed into control? These questions were uncomfortable, but I did not push them away. Growth often begins with discomfort. A week later, my son called again. This time, I was calm. I did not cry. I did not accuse. We spoke like two adults learning each other again, slowly, carefully. I told him I needed time too, not to punish him, but to heal myself. He understood. I began making small changes in my life. I stopped waiting by the phone. I stopped measuring my days by his silence. I filled my time with small routines: morning walks, evening tea by the window, old books I never had time to read. I learned how to sit with my loneliness without fighting it. Loneliness does not always mean abandonment. Sometimes it means transition. Weeks later, my son asked if we could meet, just the two of us. My heart felt heavy again, but I said yes. We met at a small cafe. When I saw him walk in, my chest tightened. He looked older, tired. We hugged quietly, no words at first. We sat across from each other holding warm cups of tea. The silence was gentle now, not threatening. He apologized again, not with excuses, just honesty. I told him something I had been practicing. "I don't need to be in every part of your life," I said. "I only need to know I still have a place." His eyes filled with tears. He told me he was learning too, learning how to be a husband, learning how to be a son. Those roles do not come with instructions. We talked about boundaries, about space, about respect. Words I once thought meant distance now felt like bridges. I did not ask to visit his home. I did not ask about his wife. I let him lead. That was my quiet gift to him. Later, he told his wife about our conversation. She was hesitant at first, but willing. Time passed. Messages returned, short ones at first, then warmer. I replied without expectations. One day, she sent me a message herself. It was simple, but it mattered. "Hope you are well." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "Thank you. I wish you peace." That was the beginning of something new. Not the old closeness, something different, something quieter, something more careful. And that is okay. I learned to forgive my son, not because he did everything right, but because he was human. I learned to forgive myself, too, for loving imperfectly, for holding on too tightly. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it loosened its grip. I still had moments of sadness. I still missed the boy who used to run into my arms, but I no longer chased that memory. I allowed him to be who he is now, and I allowed myself to grow too. Today, my house is still quiet, but it no longer feels empty. I have learned the difference between silence and loneliness. Silence can be peaceful if your heart is at rest. Loneliness only hurts when we fight it. My son is part of my life again, not in the way he once was, but in a way that fits who we both are now. Some days he calls, some days he sends a short message, and some days there is no contact at all. And I have learned to be okay with that. I no longer wait by the phone. I no longer measure love by frequency. I measure it by honesty. I understand now that children do not leave because they stop loving us. They leave because they are trying to build something of their own, and sometimes, in that process, they get lost. I also understand something about myself. Love can be gentle without being distant. Care can exist without control. And letting go does not always mean losing. Sometimes it means trusting. I think often about other parents who sit in quiet houses like mine. Parents who smile in front of others but ache when they are alone. Parents who wonder what they did wrong. If you are listening to this and feeling that pain, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. Your love mattered, and it still does, even when your child cannot show it. Life does not always give us the endings we expect. Sometimes it gives us lessons instead. Lessons about patience, about humility, about love that changes shape but does not disappear. I no longer ask for things to go back to how they were. I ask for peace, in whatever form it comes. And peace has found me. Not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, like morning light entering a quiet room. If there is one thing this journey has taught me, it is this. Do not let silence convince you that you are unloved. Do not let distance make you bitter. And do not hold on so tightly that love cannot breathe. Love your children enough to let them grow, and love yourself enough to grow with them. That is how I learned to live again, even after the day my son stopped talking to me and I lost him without a goodbye.